Good morning. It is 8 o'clock on February 13th, 2024, and I call the Economic Development Authority meeting to order. Item number 1, roll call. We do have a quorum present. Item number 2, approval of minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I will second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 3.1, administrative activities, January 2024.
All right, President Markgraf and Commissioners, you have the report in your packet. I just have a few things to highlight. Note under the Homebuyer Assistance Loan Program, one application was received in January. We have several applications we're processing, but only one was received in January. Under the Get It Ready loan program, 3 applications were received and 1 loan has closed in the amount of $15,500. That's all I wanted to point out this month, unless there's any questions.
It looks good, Heather. I will make a motion to accept the Economic Development Authority administrative activities for the month of January 2024.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4.1, schedule public hearing for adoption of the fiscal year 2024 annual plan.
All right, Commissioners and President Markgraf, the annual plan is a requirement by HUD for transparency to make information available to the public on our programs. We do a 5-year plan, obviously every 5 years, and then in between we do an annual plan. We've already started to prepare the required documentation for this, and over the next 2 months prior to the public hearing, we will continue reviewing and updating the documents, as well as we'll conduct meetings with public housing and Section 8 resident advisory boards and look at our future capital fund projects. And then we will present a draft of the annual plan to the EDA at the March meeting. So for today, we just need to schedule that public hearing, and then that will be advertised in the newspaper.
I'll make a motion to schedule a public hearing for adoption of the fiscal year 2024 annual plan for 8 a.m. Tuesday, April 9th, 2024.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 4.2, revised lease agreements.
All right. Last year, the Minnesota State Legislature passed some new laws that went into effect on January 1st of this year. In order to comply with the new laws, we needed to make a few updates to our lease agreements for the public housing programs. As long as we were updating the leases, we went ahead and made some other changes as well, which we will go through. We'll start with the Broadway House lease. The lease agreements have always been month to month for our public housing programs. HUD now requires the public housing lease agreements to have a 12-month term. So as long as we were updating the leases, we went ahead and made that change to Section 3, changing it to a 12-month term. And then in Section 7A, we are taking the responsibility of the electric bill out of the tenant's role and transitioning that over to the management's responsibility. That's because of our solar panel project that we're working on. The vendor has actually requested that we go ahead and put those in our name now before they apply for their, or put in their application for the project. So that needed to be changed in the leases. And then in Section 7B, Under the new law, landlords are now required to maintain a minimum temperature of 68 degrees Fahrenheit from October 1st through April 30th. So we have put that into the lease agreement. Another change we made many years ago, our public housing properties became smoke-free. So we've been having all new admissions sign a lease addendum when they move in, so that they're aware of the smoke-free policy. As long as we were updating the lease, we went ahead and put that right into the lease to eliminate the extra paperwork with the lease addendum. So that has been added in section 15 of the lease. And another change that was because of the new laws, landlords are required to give no less than 24 hours advance notice prior to entering a tenant's unit, and only during the hours of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. unless the tenant agrees to a time outside of those hours, or if management reasonably believes that an emergency exists which requires entrance. So that's been updated in section 24. And our old lease actually said 48-hour advance notice, so this actually reduced our requirement based on what we were doing, but just to comply with the law and to not cause confusion, we just went ahead and went with the 24-hour notice. Are there any questions on those changes before we move on?
I have a lot of thoughts, but my only question on the change is for the maintaining of 68 degrees, does that just apply to common spaces? Because I would imagine many people would want it cooler at times. Like, we're not.
Well, this is for the
controlling
winter
Yes.
months, and it would include tenant units. So if the heat system was not working, we're still required to maintain a minimum temperature of 68 degrees. So we would need to then bring in space heaters or provide another source of heat for the tenants.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, like, if they're in their apartment, like, we're not controlling the temperature for them, right? Like, if they want it at 63, they can have it at 63.
Right,
Right. Okay.
right.
So this is more
but
for
it
common
needs
spaces.
to be able to heat to 68 degrees.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but
No,
they
that's
certainly could set their thermostat lower. But if they wanted it 68 degrees and the heat wasn't keeping up, we would be non-compliant with the law.
Wow.
So that would just be if our heating system was down.
Okay.
Yeah. Which, of course, we would have done that anyway.
Right.
But now it's been put into law.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. No, that was my only question. Okay.
all right. Moving on then to the family unit leases. Some of the changes are the same that we've already outlined, but I'll just go through the bullet points. Again, the leases have been month to month. We've changed that now to the 12-month term in Section 3. Another change with the new law, all non-optional fees must be stated on the first page of the lease and accounted for in the total monthly rental payment. So to comply with this change, we simply needed to move the tenant-paid utilities to the first page of the lease. So that's been done, and that's in Section 5A. Again, due to our upcoming solar project, we're taking the electric utility from the tenant responsibility, transitioning that to management responsibility. So see Section 5A. In the houses, the tenants will still be responsible for their gas, water, sewer, and trash. So we're just taking electric off of their plate due to the solar project. Again, when our properties became smoke-free, we created a lease addendum to have the tenant sign at admission. We've incorporated that into this lease as well. So that is in Section 15 of the lease. Again, the minimum temperature requirement has been included in Section 16E, and the required notice of 24 hours and during the hours of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. has been incorporated into the lease in Section 24. If approved, the new lease agreements will be effective immediately for new admissions. The city attorney has prepared a lease amendment that will have all current tenants sign outlining these changes. The revised lease agreements are attached. Are there any questions on that?
I do have one more question. I'm
Yes.
sorry. How do you feel this will impact our ability to continue to serve people, having that 12-month lease requirement? Because it doesn't give tenants flexibility, and I don't know that these are designed to be kind of permanent homes, I guess. And so, do you know what the reason was for that change at all, or?
It's kind of, I don't agree with it. HUD does require it. I never made it a priority to update our leases because honestly, it hasn't been a problem. Most of our tenants, when they move in, are there at least a year anyway.
Yeah.
I can think of maybe 1 or 2 times where that hasn't been the case, where someone's moved out within their first year.
Right.
We are still required to let them out of their lease early if it's a medical issue. They need to go to a nursing home or assisted living or other medical reasons with a 60-day notice. So
But does
They
it
still have an
it's a
out for
12-month
certain
lease, but does
reasons.
that automatically renew every year into another 12-month, or does it go month
it's
to
month to
after?
month after the
Oh,
initial
okay.
term.
All right,
Yep,
then
so
that
we're
makes
just
more
changing that
sense. Yep.
initial term. And most leases do require an initial term of a year. So.
Fine if they want to get out early or, and with a, 34 on the waiting list, which shouldn't be a problem to replace them immediately anyway. So I
Yeah,
don't know why.
if they want to get out of their lease early and we're able to re-rent it, no, there would be no
Okay.
penalty or fine. They would be responsible for their rent until a new tenant moves in. But
It's pretty typical.
honestly, I don't see this to be a big issue for us.
I do have a question about the solar panel and the utilities. Are we separating our houses because we have to be uniform or because they're not having the solar panels? So
Yes, they are.
The houses are too? Oh, I thought it was just Broadway House.
Nope, all of our properties will have solar panels, and so none of our tenants will have to pay their electric bill because we're anticipating creating more energy than we use.
And is this too soon? Because when is that project going to be done?
Well, they're anxious to get started. They wanted us to move everything into the EDA's name before they put in their application to move forward. So they're asking me, how soon can this be done? And because of the lease and needing to update those and then get lease amendments signed for the transition, there is going to be a period of time before they're able to move forward. So we're just trying to keep the ball rolling in the right direction.
I have one further question, and it backs on what Andrea said. With the minimum temperature of 68 degrees, and I'm fine to pass it the way it is, but I would like the attorney to just take a second look at that if he hasn't taken a first look. Are we requiring it by saying we shall maintain rather than making available 68 degrees?
We're just using the wording that was put into law.
Okay,
I don't think we have the discretion to change that. It is state law.
okay.
All it's saying is that we are required to provide adequate heat. The tenant can, if they want it 65, they can turn their thermostat down to 65. But if they turn it to 68, it has to be able to heat to 68. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Just interesting. Well, unless anyone has any other questions, I would make a motion to approve the revised public housing lease agreements for Broadway House apartments and family units.
I will second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4.3, EDA, February 13th, 2024 claims list.
There's nothing out of the ordinary, so.
I'll make a motion to approve the EDA February 13th, 2024 claims list.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Same sign. Motion carries. Item number 5.1, EDA 2023 annual report.
right, you've all been provided a paper copy of the report. We just, I don't have any discussion on it. It just outlines our activity from the last year. Unless someone has questions on anything in the report, we would just need a motion to receive the report.
I'll make a motion to receive the annual report from the EDA 2023 annual report.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just do want to note on the housing progress page, the projects that we mentioned there are in the works. Those are not projects that were completed in 2023, but they are certainly projects that we worked on and spent time on with the developers.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 6, other business. At this time, we are going to take item 6.2 ahead of item 6.1. Item 6.2 is new brick contract and 2024 funding request.
Commission President, Commissioners, before you have the draft contract that was prepared by our attorney, had an initial review by Newbrick's attorney. There were a couple changes that were made. Heather has put the most updated one in there, but to date, Paul, Chris hasn't reviewed the updated contract or the changes that.
No, Chris is in Argo mitigating
Okay.
this right now.
Okay.
So as soon as he gets back.
Perfect. So today the request would be allowing myself to execute the contract, barring any significant changes that would be made, language changes, stuff like that. That our attorneys could work out would be fine. But as long as the substance of what is in here is okay with everyone, then we can move forward with that. I know President Margraf had a question about adding someone being on the board, and that's not spelled out in the contract. So I wanted to pose the question to Paul and or Tim if that was still okay to have an ex officio member on the board as part of the contract. Okay. Perfect. So we'll add that under service and responsibilities as a letter E.
The guy sent me up here.
Perfect. All right.
Mr. Wessel, do you have any comments on the agreement?
No comments. I thought probably judicious just to give you a quick update on what we're doing as well to make good use of your time. The goals and objectives that I laid out for you for your review, I will have a link emailed to the commissioners so that you can see updates as they become available on there. So that'll be accessible to you anytime you want to click on that link. Okay. A couple notes. We've been talking about the land donation project. I can give you an update that beginning next week, they're going to do soil sample testing on the property. As you may or may not know, 3M was involved in some pretty substantial litigation with the state of Minnesota for environmental contamination, and so they want to be judicious before they give us the property. And so that will begin the week of February 19th. It'll probably take 3 to 4 weeks for the soil to be analyzed, and if it passes, then we move to the next step. So that's all good. And then Wednesday, Valentine's Day, we'll be holding at the invitation of Minnesota State University. I'll be lecturing over there on business incubation and entrepreneurship. I've invited 5 different startup companies with whom I've had associations in my past, and they will be presenting. These companies represent medical AI, drone technology, environment or bioscience as far as mRNA and RNA sample preservation. We have about 42 people attending that. There will be 25 staff and grad students attending that. And the whole goal is to build stronger collaborations with Minnesota State with the ultimate goal of taking some of these projects, doing more research, and then hopefully incubating them and growing the businesses here.
Any questions from the commission? Discussion?
Right now.
Thank you.
Am I done? Okay, thank you. And thank you for your pending approval.
I have no issues with anything in the contract. I think what they have as far as the scope of service is fine, and then having their goals for what they potentially will be doing in 2024, barring any major mishaps, I think is a good measure.
Just a comment question. So my understanding is just kind of from overheard conversations that this would be the last year that the $50,000 request is expected to come in front of the EDA. Not to say that we couldn't look at, a different amount moving forward, but I just, in looking through kind of some of the plans and goals for the year, I didn't see anything that tied specifically to how that financial independence could be maintained. And I just wanted to know if there was anyone that can talk to that. There's a lot of grant funding. There's a lot of goals outlined here, a lot of kind of, I would say, aggressive, positively aggressive goals lined out, but I just didn't see anything specifically on where we wouldn't be needing to refund.
Sure. As you know, grant funding is not a sustainable revenue option. Grant funding, in our opinion, is used as a step forward to then generate sustainable revenue. There is a tab in the goals and objectives specifically dedicated for sustainability. We are looking at several things, and again, much of it is based on the land donation, because we have figured out sustainable revenue models for that once the land has been donated. And that can be a combination of leases. It can be a combination of purchase power agreements from the solar farm, which would generate revenues as well. And then by incubating businesses, I think we need to understand that it's much different nowadays when we start companies. I believe that no longer can we just help them with preliminary research and send them to the bank and on their merry way. I think we need to have a much more ingrained approach where we walk alongside them for a longer period of time, help them with organizational structure, help them with board selection, as I've mentioned this earlier. And in so doing, I believe that those value-added services that we provide should either be paid for by the startup company in forms of a minority share of the company, that in the event of a liquidation, that then we would get a windfall that keeps our initiatives going as well. And so those are some of the things that we're looking at. But truthfully, so much of it is based on this land donation, because we have a whole ecosystem planned with sustainable revenue in mind.
Right. Would there be a plan B if the land donation, if there's soil quality issues, like is there a backup plan? And you don't have to answer it. It's just something to think about. Just because I know how quickly 12 months can go.
Sure. I think our confidence level is really high that it will pass, because prior to that land was rented for farmland. And so he was able to grow crops on there. So if there was any huge environmental damage, I don't think he'd be able to grow crops. We have been asked by several organizations, not only in New Ulm, but in the surrounding area, to provide fractional leadership as well. And if you look at one of our core staples, that is a paid revenue stream that they, because either they don't have the right board composition or don't have the right strategy, they're looking to Newbrick to help them with that, and we believe that that should be a fee for service so that we can then continue our mission as well.
Perfect.
Okay?
That answers my question. Thank you.
Yep.
Commissioners, what are your wishes?
Chris, I just have a question. In approving this today, we would be requesting it as presented, or is there any more follow-up or expected changes from?
No, the only expected change, there are a handful of questions that Chris just has to review, but what is in here is what the attorney had drafted for Chris's review. And again, you would be approving execution barring any substantial changes, so that'd be stuff to scope of work, but any minor language changes would be, essentially fine. And then we will be adding bullet point E under services, stating the ex officio member on their board.
Perfect.
And Chris, just a point of clarification then, funding is only for your, then that ex officio position then would resolve after the end of that year.
Yes.
Unless we would be providing a
Another-
different amount or something, I think that would be determined. But I think if we're still providing funding.
Yes, it would be
Yeah.
whatever is in the contract moving forward.
Yep. Well, with no additional major changes, any other comments, I'll make a motion to approve the Newbrick contract and 2024 funding request in the amount of $50,000 and authorize executive director to execute the contract.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We now go back to 6.1, Newbrick ex officio member. As we just talked about, part of the contract will be to include an ex officio member from our commission to be on the Newbrick's board and to be the liaison between the two entities. What are your wishes, Commissioner, for that person?
I'd be interested in that position.
I would be interested in that position. I know you were. But
So who wants to be the main person and then the backup? Does it matter?
The only thing I'm thinking in terms of that is there's some crossover in Newbrick and some involvement with the CTE Center and things like that. I'm serving on this commission, but also the chamber liaison for the Business Education Network. There's a lot of crossover there where we can cover a lot of bases with one stone. And I feel I have positive working relationships with many of the Newbrick boards. So I am not, I can go either way with it, but I think it would be kind of a good way to communicate on things in several areas.
I would agree. I would be fine with being the primary or the secondary contact. What I would state just for those here representing Newbrick is that in the past, I was in this role and only one time did I receive minutes from any of the meetings. I didn't know if there were calendar invites. I think I was just reminded that they're on a certain time at a certain place. And I wasn't receiving any follow-up. And so that is something that for whoever is selected to serve, if we are being ex officio, I would like to be treated, as much as a board member as possible. I understand that there's some conflicts of interest that arise and proprietary conversations that, can't be shared. But I know we can do a better job here this year. We all can.
Those at home can't hear you.
I want to just say that as an EDA president, or I'm sorry, Newbrick president, I do agree with your comments so we can do a better job working together. I think it's vitally important for our community that we do so. And the continued relationship for many years to come is important to our community for sure. We would welcome a representative, so whoever that might be, whoever you choose, we would welcome that. And again, look forward to that opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will make a motion to have Andrea Becker serve as the ex officio member of the New Ulm Business Resource and Innovation Center, and Commissioner Lindsay Henn to serve as alternative ex officio member if unable to attend.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 7.1, Economic Development Activity Report.
All right, commissioners, you have the report.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I'll just note the New Ulm Partnership met in January and talked about potential funding sources for additional Career Technical Education Center equipment. I do believe they will be coming to the EDA in the near future with an ask for some financial support toward that goal. And then we also discussed meeting with local housing developers at an upcoming meeting. And this month, we are going to be meeting with Brian Fisher from Design Home Center to get his feedback. There was also talk about bringing in, I can't think of his name, from Big Ideas.
Joe Schatzko.
Yes, thank you. At a meeting as well. So we'll see if that maybe happens at the March meeting. But just kind of wanting to talk with our local housing developers on ideas they have maybe for making it easier to develop housing in New Ulm. On the childcare team, we just met, and our focus this year is going to be on finding solutions for after-school care for grades K through 3. And that is based on responses to a parent survey that was done by New Ulm Public Schools. That seems to be the gap that parents are having. And then under the Small Business Incentive Grant Program, note that 6 businesses received their grant during the month of January. Under other, Chris and I met with representatives from Region 9 to discuss a potential energy park in New Ulm. Had some media coverage and completed 2 business outreach visits. Any questions on any of that?
And then we just continue to plug away at the 4 potential housing development projects that are happening, let's go baby steps along the way. So I'll bring more information as those start coming to fruition. Just an update on the EDA lots. So the purchase agreement was drafted and it's in their attorney's hands now. There was I would say, a sticking point with potential tanks and stuff under one of the lots there. So wanted to make sure we had all the necessary information, and I think we were able to get that to them. So we should be able to close on that fairly soon.
Make a motion to accept Economic Development Activity Report for January 2024 activities.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.